Site size adjustments feel precise. Dollar per square foot, clean numbers, confident answers. But if you apply them to the wrong price, that precision is an illusion. Today, in this episode of Value Talk, we're going to strip out time first and watch how site size actually behaves when the sale price is cleaned.
Welcome to Value Talk, your source for property valuations, real estate insights, and what's really driving the market. And now here's Douglas.
All right, let's get into this. In this episode, we're going to move from time into site size, and the order does matter. We're going to carry forward the same data set we've been using, and we're starting from prices already adjusted for concessions. From there, we're going to apply the time adjustment we derived in the last episode, so every sale is on the same timeline. Once time is solved, we'll look at how site size actually behaves using regression, not assumptions. We'll do this first in the established neighborhood, then run the exact same process in the newer neighborhood to compare how site sizes respond. The goal isn't to find a universal site adjustment. It is to understand what the price is still carrying when land is being measured. So let's get out of the office, move to the data, and walk through it step by step. Before we move forward, I just want to quickly bring us back up to speed. This is the established neighborhood that we've been working with throughout this whole series. Nothing about this location is changing. We're staying in the same market context. This data set here, this is the one we've been using in all the prior episodes. Same sales, same time period, same neighborhood. The only thing that's changed so far is how we've treated prices. In the concessions episode, we looked at how seller concessions were actually distributed in this market. In this histogram, it showed us that concessions weren't random, they clustered. Because of that, we adjusted the sale price to remove that transaction level distortion, and that gave us a new base price, the adjusted sold price for concessions, which is what we're going to carry forward. So at this point, concessions have already been addressed. Price now reflects what the buyer and the sellers had actually negotiated, not how the deal was structured. So at this point, every sale is already adjusted for concessions right here in the adjusted sold price for concessions. The next step is to bring them onto the same point in time. I'm going to apply a temporal time adjustment on the concessions adjusted sale price. The goal here isn't to change the properties, it's to synchronize the market. So for the base value, I'm going to use the adjusted sold price for concessions. That way, time is being applied on top of the transaction normalized pricing we got from applying that concession adjustment. I'm going to use the contract date, because that's when the prices were negotiated between the buyers and sellers. And it's also the same date basis we used to derive the time adjustment in the prior episode. Now I'm going to set the effective date to October 1st, 2025, which is the effective date of both of the data sets we've been analyzing. This keeps everything consistent across both neighborhoods. Now here I'm going to apply a dollar per day adjustment. For this neighborhood, we had derived that from the market data, so it's not an assumption. And the rate at which we did was $29.60 a day. This is coming directly from the regression we had already walked through in the last episode. Now, I'm going to name this column the adjusted sale price for concessions and time. This is so that we know exactly what's been applied and in what order. So now prices are fully normalized, first for concessions and now for time. So with market timing removed, we can finally look at site size without price pressure leaking into it. All right, we're going to look at three versions of the same data, same sales, same neighborhood. The only thing that changes is how prices are being treated. So first we're going to look at the sold price, then we're going to look at the adjusted sold price for concessions, then we're going to look at the adjusted sold price for concessions at time. We're going to use regression analysis to see if there's any changes in the land value across this neighborhood. So first we're going to look at the sold price versus site size, older neighborhood data, same data. So we're getting about $3.09 a square foot. Now that's based on just the actual sold price in the neighborhood. So let's go ahead and we're going to load up the sell price that's been adjusted just for concessions and see if there's any change. So we're about $3.25 a square foot. Now that's higher. That tells me concessions are inflating the apparent land signal. So next up, let's go ahead and we've applied the time adjustment of $20.60 a day. So now we're going to look at that adjusted sale price for concessions and time and see if there's any changes there. So the adjustment's settling down now back around $3.16 a square foot. So land didn't just suddenly change. What changed was what the price was still carrying. But before I trust any coefficient, I want to look at the distribution of the site sizes in the neighborhood. So we're going to use a histogram to do that. We're going to load up the same older neighborhood data, and we're going to look at site size for this. All right, so right there, you're going to see that the neighborhood is skewed to the right. Most of the sites are clustered down here in the lower end with this long tail of larger lots. That tells me a linear behavior exists in this neighborhood, but it's being pulled by a few large sites, which matters when you're interpreting the regression. So that's the established neighborhood. Let's go over to the newer neighborhood and see what changes when the structure of the market changes. All right, just like the established neighborhood, let's take a look at the newer neighborhood just to get orientated with where we were before. This is the newer neighborhood, builder dominant neighborhood, same market area, but a very different development pattern. So let's bring up the data set from that market. This is the data set that we've been working with, same time period we've been analyzing, same everything, same analytical process. What changes here isn't the method, it's just the structure of the market. In the concessions episode, we looked at how seller concessions were distributed in this newer neighborhood. The histogram shows a much tighter pattern. Concessions were more uniform with less dispersion across the sales. Because of that, adjusting for concessions produced little movement in the pricing of the actual sale price to the adjusted sale price. So at this point, concessions have been adjusted. The prices are now reflecting the market pressure, not the deal structure, which we're going to now apply the time adjustment that we've derived in the last episode, just like we did in the established neighborhood, and we can look at the site size more cleanly. All right, so every sale is already adjusted for concessions. The next step is to bring them on to the same point in time. So we're going to apply that temporal time adjustment. And here we're going to use the adjusted sold price for concessions as our base value. And we're going to use the contract date as our date, because that, again, is when the price was negotiated. And it's the same date basis we've used to derive the time adjustments in the prior episode. Now I'm going to set the effective date, just like in the other data set for the established neighborhood, to October 1st, which is the effective date of everything we've been analyzing. This keeps it consistent across the neighborhoods. And again, we're going to use the dollar per day adjustment. Now in this neighborhood, we derived that was $38.68 a day. We had done that through regression. So we walked through that in the last episode. So this was derived from the market data. Again, it's not an assumption. So here I'm going to actually rename the new adjusted row to adjusted sold price for concessions and time, just like in the established neighborhood. So now we have new rows for adjusted for concessions and adjusted for concessions at time. So now the prices are fully normalized for concessions and time. So with market timing removed, we can finally look now at what the site size is going to do to it. So let's go pull up our regression. We're going to look at those three sale prices again and see if there's any changes in this market versus the established market. All right, so let's go ahead and load up the data for the newer neighborhood with our new adjusted sale prices. First, we're going to look at the sold price for site size and see what we come up with for an adjustment. So about $1.97 a square foot, and that's looking at just the sold price versus the site size with nothing in the market adjusted for. So let's go ahead and look at the concession adjusted sale price for just concessions only. And we're still hanging around $1.97 right here. So almost no change at all. So now we're going to do is look at that adjustment for time in concessions where we applied to $38.68 a day and see if there's any difference there. So here on site size for adjusted in time, we're looking at about $2.25 a square foot. So here, time is the driver. Concessions aren't masking land, market pressure is. So I want to go back and see the distribution in this site size as we did in the established neighborhood by using the histogram. So we're going to pull up the newer neighborhood and we're going to look at the site size here and see what the histogram. So the histogram here is telling us that site sizes are a lot tighter. This neighborhood is more uniform. There's less excess land. That's a different marker structure and it reacts differently. We're doing the same method, same time period, just different neighborhoods. Site size doesn't change. What price is still carrying does. So now that we've seen both neighborhoods, let's step back into the office and we're going to put all this together in context. All right, back here in the office. In the last episode, we talked about time as market behavior. And today we took the next step by looking at site size. But this episode wasn't about finding a site size adjustment. It was about making sure we were measuring site size on the right price. We saw that when you carry forward concession adjusted prices, site size starts to behave more consistently. And when you apply time before site size, the land signal settles. Sometimes it moved higher, sometimes it moved lower, and sometimes it just barely moved at all. Each of those outcomes tells you something different though about the market. But what really mattered was sequence. If you measure site size on a price that's still carrying time or concessions, the math still works, but the meaning doesn't. So in this episode, we learned how site size behaves once price pressure is removed. In the next episode, we're going to take that same layered approach and we're going to move it in the gross living area. We're going to use prices that are already adjusted for concessions, time, and site size. So it's the same logic, the same sequence, and we're going to do the same discipline. So until then, I'm Douglas. Stay curious, stay sharp, and always stay focused on value.
ValuTalk is produced by Data Hub Solutions. For tools, insights, and more, visit our website at datahubsolutionsllc.com. Stay informed, stay ahead.